And if we've never met before, you've never seen me, my name is Lindsay Helm. I am the founder and CEO of Empower Employ. And here at Empower Employ, we are connecting corporate America to our military population of talent through corporate education and technology solutions. And I'm so glad to have each and every one of you with us today. Today, I'm excited to introduce not my first guest, but the guest of the hour, if you will, Adam Braatz. Adam is a very recognizable voice in the veteran advocacy ecosystem, and he frequently speaks on veteran and military transition issues. He recently authored a book on LinkedIn mastery for veterans and transitioning service members, and is also the founder of The Thriving Veteran. So, ladies, gentlemen, people of all ages, welcome to the stage, Adam Braatz.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining us. It's kind of a big deal. You know, we had to follow people that have voices that need to be amplified. And I've been following yours for a couple of years and decided that you'd be an ideal person to give some tips and tricks to our veteran and military spouse population. So let's just kick it right off. Would you mind? I know I read your bio, but let's hear in your words, who you are and what you do.
Well, my name's Adam Braatz, like she said. I'm an author. I speak on veteran issues, a nonprofit executive, typically have worked until very recently, actually, almost exclusively in the veteran advocacy nonprofit ecosystem. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of and evangelist for and advocate for LinkedIn. And I've seen LinkedIn. I've seen when leveraged effectively, I've seen people unleash some pretty ridiculous power from LinkedIn that in my estimation cannot be rivaled by other platforms out there. So yeah, I talk all the time about LinkedIn best practices, especially for veterans and transitioning service members, to hopefully get them to unleash their best possible life after service and careers.
Yeah, that's true. I've definitely seen what I call like the power of LinkedIn, where I've had, multiple spouses or veterans reach out and then end up employed within like 6 days. I mean, from start to finish. So, that being said, how did you use your military network to expand your professional network on LinkedIn?
Well, and that's where I started. And I suggest everybody start where they are comfortable. I started when I first launched my LinkedIn. My network development was my brother and my family members, my cousins, my aunts and uncles, and then my military family, folks who I went to high school and college with. That's where I started. And I suggest everybody start where they're comfortable and start developing their network as they become familiar with LinkedIn best practices. It doesn't have to be perfect from the onset, and everything that you do doesn't have to be perfect from the word go. So, as you're figuring it out and figuring out what works for you and what doesn't, do it amongst friends, do it amongst the people who you're comfortable with. I would definitely advise branching out from there. I see a lot of veterans who stay very comfortable when it comes to their network development, whether it be their in-person networking or their digital networking, expanding their network just with folks who they served for or with. And on the other end of the coin, live and in person, networking exclusively at their American Legion or VFW, which is, I'm a member of my local American Legion VFW. That's an important part. You got to have your tribe, your community, but it's also important to branch out from that bubble, because we're not in the military bubble anymore. And to fully integrate into the civilian workforce, we need to expand into it and adjust and adapt accordingly.
Totally fair. And I think when I transitioned out, or actually I know when I transitioned out, I was kind of one of the first to go out of my section. So like from a military network perspective, I had to go outside my immediate like 5-pack that I was tasked with, and got lucky enough that my counterpart who worked at the information center for the installation, and I was almost using an acronym there, but I wasn't sure that everybody would catch it. She had been coaching me once she found out that I was going to get out. So I had a mentor, and she helped me land a job right next to her in the field that I landed. So I was networking, and this was before LinkedIn was like a thing. That's how old I am. It was a cool thing, but nobody really knew. So I totally agree with you there. And I had to step outside my comfort zone. Now, years later, oddly enough, her and I are best friends, and I actually get to speak to her ERG in a couple weeks about
Oh, nice.
a similar topic at her tech company. So totally agree with you there.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you give to a fellow veteran who is looking to create a strong LinkedIn profile that highlights like their military background?
I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't suggest overtly, and allow me to explain.
Yeah, of course.
I wouldn't suggest that one overtly highlights their military experience, especially as they are reintegrating into this. They're integrating into the civilian workforce. If you've ever heard the term, "You got to dress for the job you want," uh, if your profile picture has you in uniform, I strongly advise, looking tough. And I only say that, I'm not making fun. That's what my LinkedIn profile was from the word go. I was wearing this hat right here, my campaign hat, looking tough. And to me, I thought, hey, that exudes polished professionalism, right? And I talked about that I'm a veteran this, veteran that, used acronyms, military sounding jargon and whatnot. And I thought, this is going to sound really impressive. And nobody told me otherwise. And I highlighted my military experience and what that garnered in folks who were outside of my military bubble as I worked to expand my network. What I got was, thanks for your service, not, I'd love to talk to you about opportunities. And in my face-to-face, my interviews, I'd get, thanks for your service. I just don't see how any of that applies here. And it's not really about translating skills so much as it is speaking the language of the place where you hope to work, which I was failing to do. So highlighting your military skills, they just have to be spoken in a way that is understandable and digestible to someone who doesn't have military experience. A tough pill to swallow is that fewer and fewer people have military experience these days. And then exponentially in relation, we have fewer and fewer and fewer people who have family members, immediate family members, who are veterans. So the number of folks out there who truly get it, whether they're supportive of you or not, whether they have a magnetic ribbon on their car that says support our troops or not, they don't get you. They don't understand. And if most of them don't, rather. And if you are trying to force yourself, your military self, your non-civilian self down people's throats, you're going to have a really hard time. The analogy that I use is, if my dream job was with a company that was headquartered out of China, and I was going there to interview for this dream job, and at this company that was headquartered in China, they spoke Chinese and they observed Chinese customs and courtesies. Going in there, am I going to say like, hey, look, I'm not going to hide who I am. I'm proud to be an American who speaks English, and go in there, with a cutoff shirt, American flag, and go in there and speak English and give high fives and stuff and do my American thing. No, I'm not. I'm going to adapt. I'm going to read the room, and I'm going to speak the language of the place where I wish to be assimilated into. Does that mean that I'm ashamed of being an American that speaks English? No, that just means that I know how to read the room. And a lot of veterans conflate that adaptation with hiding who they are, or feeling ashamed of who they are and what they've done and their service, which absolutely is not it. You just need to learn how to read the room.
Yeah. And in the beginning, I had a really hard time, like oddly enough, getting out, because when you do, my background is technical. And so when I got out, it was really hard to explain to somebody what a LAN was, or how we would deploy I would say deploy, but it should be implement new laptop upgrades to an entire unit in 7 days with no warning other than, surprise, you're getting new laptops, and making sure that everyone can function, or what it was like to pack up all the equipment, box it up, track it, project manage it to get it from point A to point B, unbox it, set it back up. installing servers and routers and running cables and ports and configure. I could not say any of that in English, like plain English. I definitely really struggled. And then even when I got more into the civilian world and I started working around non-technical people, I had to have a mentor sit me down that said, Lindsay, I just watched you brief an entire room of C-level executives that have to make the equivalent of C-level decisions about how this building is going to operate. They all agreed with you, but not a one of them had a clue what you just said because they were afraid to ask a question. I didn't realize that I was speaking at such a high level that they didn't understand it either. And no one prompted me with a question. They basically let me run amok. And like, that's a lot of trust there, one. So
Right. Yeah.
it's really important. I agree with you to totally do that. With that, there are a lot of kind of, nonprofits that are out there that are continually evolving to improve, and serve the veteran population. Some of them do military skills translators, which is where I was going with that. Some of them do resume writing. Some of them do mentorship. Some of them do all of it. How have you seen the nonprofit, ecosystem evolve to better serve the needs of veterans and military service members and their family members?
I'm not sure if the veteran serving nonprofit ecosystem has evolved in the last 5 years to better serve the veteran community. And I swear, I'm not like trying to be contrarian to every question that you know.
So I don't want to interrupt you. I live for the conversations because
Okay.
what started Empower Employee was that I have a completely different perspective on the military hiring process. The company's mission is to me completely different than what everybody else is doing out there. And I've really been working to kind of hone that in when I talk to people. How I got started was I made somebody, I accepted a challenge. And so you're not being contrarian in sharing your thoughts and feelings and looking at it differently. I truly feel like, please don't come for me, LinkedIn or anyone. There are a ton of people out there putting out like old information, and we recycle a lot of the same material. And in order to improve, and hopefully this encourages you to be comfortable, in order to improve the processes, somebody has to challenge it. We didn't get to the moon by saying, it's cool, whatever, or have the technology that we have today without somebody saying, hey, let's try a different way. So I think a lot of the places haven't evolved, but I would like to hear your perspective, on why you think that is.
And a lot of it comes from a place of wanting to serve people and wanting to help. People form nonprofits that are veterans serving because they have a love for this community and, a deep passion for wanting to help these people and their families. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But sometimes that excitement and that eagerness to do good is not preempted by the question that everyone should be asking themselves before they form a nonprofit organization. And that is, does this already exist? And is it targeted enough, what I'm hoping to do? And am I the best suited to do this mission, to execute this mission? And people are so passionate, they just skip through that. And often that leads to a lack of targeting. And we have very broad, I have an organization that helps veterans. Well, how do you help veterans? Oh, I just help them. I want to help. Okay, cool. Where do you help them? Nationwide. I help veterans and their families too, and their spouses and their caregivers and their dependents. And I just help. And that's great. But there are a lot of organizations, national organizations that do that. There are a lot of local organizations that do that in a more targeted fashion. So if you're being redundant, all you're doing is creating a fancy website and a redundancy that adds to this fog for transitioning service members who don't know, do I go with this organization or this organization or this organization, who often are provided with a packet of like, here's 50 links to 50 organizations that are going to help you. And then they get overwhelmed and they get lost in the fog and lost in the sauce, and they don't, they're overwhelmed into inaction. And it also confuses potential sponsors and donors. and it diverts really important, really scarce financial resources away from the targeted and good nonprofit organizations. And that then leads to, when these nonprofits who are not targeted and haven't asked themselves those important questions on the front end, that leads to those nonprofits folding, and then first-time donors are disenfranchised and they never want to donate again. They say these, veteran nonprofits don't do anything, so I'm just gonna, take a step back. And so it's unfair to donors, it's unfair to corporate sponsors, it's unfair to veterans. And people don't think about that when they have noble intentions and a passion for wanting to help people. They don't think about the possibility of it doing harm. Does that mean that I think the longer standing, the legacy institutions that have dominated the veteran serving nonprofit ecosystem are perfect? Nope, definitely not. They have their own issues, obviously, when it comes to modernizing and reaching younger generations of veterans. Do I think that nobody should ever start a new veteran serving nonprofit? Didn't say that either. I think people need to ask themselves those very, very important questions and do thorough, in-depth research before embarking upon it, and do so with a targeted thing in mind. Otherwise, they'll do more hurt than help. And that's been happening a lot. We have, almost 50,000 now self-proclaimed veteran serving nonprofit organizations. Granted, a large percentage of those are charters, local charters like American Legion, DAV, VFW, charters of the longer standing legacy veteran serving organizations, the ones who are veteran service organizations, the ones who are authorized to file VA claims on behalf of their constituents. But still, I'd say we're still 20, 30,000 veteran serving nonprofits, too many in this country, and actually reducing and merging and working together is what needs to happen for the nonprofit ecosystem, for the veteran serving nonprofit ecosystem to actually better serve veterans. More is not better in this case. We need more consolidation and more cooperation, which just hasn't been the case.
Yeah, I do feel like there is a lot to choose from and people get really overwhelmed. And I think, a couple people have tried to tackle this to do like a one-stop shop for everything, but with a new solution or a new whatever, I could just call it solution, whether that be profit, tech, whatever, spinning up like every other week. Like I've been watching my LinkedIn and it's like, oh, we're a new staffing agency, or oh, we're doing this. And it's like, good Lord, there's so much out there.
Yeah.
And that's why we kind of take a programmatic approach. And this kind of leans into the next question. Everybody's really focused on, as they should be, the veteran and military spouse population. But for us, we're like, hi, that's awesome. But if corporate America isn't ready for you and programmatically internally is not ready to take that on, all of this other work means nothing. So let's flip the coin and go internal to do that. On top of, giving a community of places for people to meet, which is kind of what, the concept was for us. So I totally understand. I think we covered a lot of the challenges that these veteran organizations face, but then also, how, I guess one of the questions we wanted to cover was how can employers better understand and support the veterans in the workspace? I have my opinion on this. We just kind of touched on it, but I'd love to hear yours. I really like all of your opinions. This is great.
Oh, so, thank you. And it's
all things.
It's ironic. You said the second you said the word focus, the autofocus on my camera just turned me into like a picture of a, mountain Yeti. I'm blurry. Let's see if I can get it to refocus here.
So look good over here. So you're good. I have
got it.
Cool. Off camera, I have an acronym for focus that we will not share publicly. It's pretty funny, but
you have to share it in the DM.
But how do you think that we can kind of solve? I'm a problem solver as an entrepreneur. It's one of the reasons that I've set out on this journey. So we've talked about, all the challenges. What are some proposed solutions?
Well, the key is education, and not just education, but also the kind of consolidation that I had, a consolidation and a unification around best practices. And that can come from for-profit agencies, that can come from nonprofit agencies, but again, we have an information fog that is leading to confusion on both the potential employee part and the potential employer. Corporate entities, many of them get it, quote unquote, get it, but a lot of them don't. And many of them who don't get it want to get it. And they understand that having veteran talent in their pipeline, up and down the chain, up and down the ladder, is beneficial to them, not just from a tax incentive perspective, but beneficial to their teams. Often veterans are they can't, obviously veterans are not a monolith. We're not all the same, but veterans come from an environment where they are trained in best practices and good habits of follower-ship and leadership and being a good team player, and soft skills and non-primary skills, like how to use a copy machine in Microsoft Office and all that fun stuff, that leads to reduced training need to get somebody spun up and functioning at a high level. And so a lot of employers get that. Some of them still don't. A lot of corporate employers think that they want to hire veterans because it's the right thing to do. And like, again, the best of intentions in that regard, but veterans are not charity cases when it comes to employment. They bring a lot to the table. And as I mentioned earlier, veterans are not a monolith. We're not all the same. I mean, you can't a veteran who is a 30-year commissioned officer retiring brings different skills and experiences to the table than a first-term enlisted transitioner who's 22 years old and has one enlistment under their belt. And there's a huge gap, like a wide spectrum of things in between, of different levels of experience and education and applied experience and technical experience and secondary and tertiary skills. And so I think the employers understanding that they don't get it and they'll never really truly get it as an organization, and that they need to seek insights from folks who do. That's where, I mean, you see a lot of issues in corporate marketing, trying to cater to veterans and just with the most cartoonish caricature idea of who we are and what we represent and what our family situation is like. And, it makes you think. You see those commercials and you know exactly the kind that I'm talking about. And it's like, man, if they would have spent 5 minutes just talking to a veteran, they could have avoided looking dumb to literally all of us. And it's the same goes for corporate hiring practices. Having someone in the know, at least maybe not even on staff, but advising you is important. And then having that consolidation, when you have 5 different local nonprofits telling you this is how you hire veterans, or we're creating the state's veteran employment pipeline, and there's 5 other people who are claiming to do the exact same thing, you're not asking yourself that question, is like, is this happening already? And am I adding to confusion and fog? If you have a nonprofit organization that's trying to create a workforce pipeline, or trying to a veteran corporate workforce pipeline, but no one on your staff has ever worked for a corporate entity, or if you're trying to train a corporate entity on best diverse and veteran serving ERG practices, employee resource group practices, but you've never personally been in an ERG, you're likely not asking yourself the question, am I the best suited to train, to educate both ends on how to bridge the gap? And that's what I'm seeing in the ecosystem, is a ton of bloat and saturation and lots of nonprofits and for-profit entities that are all trying to nudge their way to the front saying, I am the voice for this. And 98% of them are not and should not be. So the consolidation of the messaging is important, and getting the corporate the hiring managers to understand that they need someone to provide them with insights if they don't have them, which all comes down to education and evangelism, which is precisely what I'm doing right now.
I agree. I was like, wow, I feel like I just got taken to church and then
Yeah,
some.
sorry.
No, it's good.
I'm a
We need
little passionate about this topic.
I mean, as you should be. And so I noticed that, one of the questions we were going to cover was what the best way. Sorry, construction in my house. I
Oh
apologize.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
we're working on home office. We're evangelizing the home
Good for
office.
you. Good for you.
To make room for expansion. But so, what is the best way to get in touch with you? And I noticed at the end of your YouTube ticker, and maybe we didn't cover it, you have at the Thriving Veteran. So
Mhm.
I have a fun little hashtag myself, but could you talk about a little bit about the Thriving Veteran and the best way to get in contact for you? And then I have a couple questions in the chat we need to cover before we wrap up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, right on. Absolutely. Well, first, to get in touch with me, find me on LinkedIn. If you have questions about things, you can send me a DM. I don't think I have ever turned somebody away and been like, I don't have time for you. Sometimes I need a poke here and there to if I'm swamped with LinkedIn stuff, but I'm here to help you, whether you are an advocate or a supporter, or you yourself are a veteran or military family member or caregiver that's looking for insights on how to overcome some challenges you have, especially as it pertains to LinkedIn. I'm here to help. So please reach out. You can find the Thriving Veteran on YouTube. There's also a LinkedIn company page for the Thriving Veteran. Most of my veteran serving content does and will be coming from those places. As my nonprofit advocacy work shifts in different directions. My by day advocacy work. But yeah, reach out with. I want to be helpful overarchingly to people who need help. And I see you put the LinkedIn Mastery down there. My book, LinkedIn Mastery for Veterans and Transitioning Service Members. I'd encourage everyone to pick that up. And today only, this is the only time the sale will ever exist for a 24-hour period of time, because we're trying to push it to get that bestseller badge, the coveted Amazon bestseller badge. The ebook version of LinkedIn Mastery for Veterans and Transitioning Service Members today only is 99 cents. And it's normally $8.99. And the print is normally $14.99 or whatever. So like $1 to get this ebook. And again, we're trying to get it into as many hands as possible to get that coveted bestseller badge. But I'd encourage you to grab that. You can also buy a copy for your friend or multiple for an organization, or however you want to do it. But any questions about that, you can always reach out.
Well, that's amazing. And then just kind of full circle, take a second to go out and get the LinkedIn. My plan is to take this podcast and tag a couple of our industry partners and a couple nonprofits that have a mighty to large reach. Hopefully that information about the book, which I have seen, is amazing. I think I saw previews of it like months ago before it was like live somewhere. I want to say it was on LinkedIn. So
the print version was out a couple months ago. The ebook version is the one we're celebrating now.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Oh,
So I just need to touch on one question that we got asked from a veteran who I love to death. His name is Bobby Thompson. Great human, has done the actual switch and done it so well. And now is also a huge advocate. He wants to know how to prepare for like that rewiring code switch from like veteran to corporate worker or entrepreneur, or is there a checklist? Everybody asks that all the time. We're such checklist people. Like, is there a checklist for this? Like, what do I do? What's some of the prep work that goes into that?
Well, it begins with acknowledging that transition is a process, and an ongoing process that does not end when you get your first civilian gig. It is an ongoing process that impacts not just you, but your entire family. So acknowledging that it is a process, there is not really a finish line, and that everyone around you is part of that, is a big step one. And step two is giving yourself grace. You have been hardwired to think a certain way. You've been indoctrinated and inculcated, and that's not a bad thing. I know that there's typically a negative connotation with those words, but you have been programmed in a certain way view things a certain way, to talk in a certain way. And it takes time for you uh, to relearn how to exist in the civilian world. Some people, it's very easy for. Some people, it's a big challenge, and it is different person to person. But either way, give yourself grace, and be open to corrections and input and feedback. Bring your resume and your LinkedIn page to someone who is not a veteran or service member, someone outside the bubble, and say, "Hey, look at this. Does this make sense to you? I'd love your impact, your input." Be receptive to when people tell you that, like, "Hey, what you're saying and doing is kind of weird." Uh, for example, just yesterday, I was speaking with a colleague, and I was using the term POC. Who's your POC for this? Who's your POC for that? Who's your POC for that? And so you and I understand that in the military, that means your point of contact. And this colleague says, "Hey, just so you know, very commonly in our industry, which is now your industry, POC is, I think you're trying to say point of contact, but we use it exclusively for person of color. So what you're doing is not wrong. I just wanted to let you know that it doesn't really fit here." And I was like, "Thank you for educating me. I'm so glad you said that. Now I'm going to say representative or advisor or whatever." And you're going to get feedback like that. And you got to take it on the chin and adapt and overcome. You were able to be trained into this foreign world, and you can definitely be trained out of it. But I mean, huge process. I was wearing shirt stays, like the kinds that clip to your shirt and then down to your socks for like the first 3 months after in my first civilian job. I really was. You
What
should,
do-
you,
I
yeah.
have to ask because Army didn't click. What is a shirt stay? It sounds like suspenders. Help me understand this.
So a shirt stay helps, and this is from my time as an instructor.
Okay.
Because everybody, all your stuff needs to look like it's painted on, basically, and that was me, 50 pounds ago. So, it basically, they clip to the bottom of your shirt, and then they're like an elastic band that goes from the bottom of your shirt, and you clip the other end to the top of your socks, and it keeps it from getting untucked and blah 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 blah. So I was wearing that with my civilian attire for months. I was calling my boss sir. That was really hard for me, and I know a lot of people who come from sir and ma'am cultures, especially down south, where that is not unheard of. Really, and then go into the military, and they go work at a place that's not a sir or ma'am culture, or a corporate entity, even in the South, that's not a sir or ma'am culture. Like, they struggle mightily. I was calling a boss sir, even after he said, "Call me Ben." It's like, "Yes, sir." Like, and it didn't make me look more respectful. It just made me look like an animal out of captivity that had
Yeah,
escaped from the zoo or something.
I am from Kentucky, and a lot of my upbringing is exactly that. And then
Mm,
when I got to, my parents weren't super strict about it. They were
mm.
pretty like normal. The military made it infinitely worse.
Oh
And
yeah.
then all of my training for the military, outside of like the sir and ma'am that happens, was in Georgia.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
literally, there was
Yeah.
no. So I actually just wrote an article about it. Like it's something that I am constantly working on. And then I made the mistake. I won't say it was a mistake. When my kids were little, I have teenage children. Out of manners, I taught them the same vernacular, and
Yeah.
I would have their teachers say the same thing. Like, they don't have to call me ma'am, and I'm like, they do if they want to live. Now my kids were like, they were two. I had only been out of the military a very amount of time. And so when my children would say back to me, "What, mom?" I'd be like, "I'm sorry, I can't hear you right now." Like, and I have had to reprogram
Mm,
our
mhm.
entire family operation just on that. So all fair, all fair. But
Yeah.
bringing things to a close, I am so grateful to have you here today. You have such an interesting perspective, and I don't mean like interesting, like offensive, like a fresh perspective that I really value. So I want to thank you for your time, and everyone watching, please check out the Thriving Veteran and Adam over here with all his cool tips, tricks, and knowledge. For everybody else watching, check back in with us in 2 weeks for our next Empower Hour guest. I'm looking forward to having, excuse me, 1 second. Having that person present, and I will see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks again, Adam, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.